everybody, welcome back to episode 17 of Obscuracast. We have my usual cohort and co-host Dan O'Neill with me this evening. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. We're finally past the whole snowstorm that we had, or at least we are. We're back to somewhat normalcy back in Ohio. I don't know how you guys are in Pennsylvania, but at least we're back to normal, so that's good.
Yeah, we're pretty much back to normal.
And you told me you were back to work and all that stuff as far as being able to see people and all that good shit, so that's good.
Yeah.
But I wanted to plug our socials. I know sometimes I forget to do it at the beginning of the episode. So if you guys are curious, we have started, and this is probably news to Dan as well. We started posting shorts to our Instagram account again. So I have done that for a couple episodes. We still are backlogged on a couple episodes to do this for you guys. But if you are interested, we have an X account, which is just x.com, and the handle is Obscuracast, and the same thing for Instagram. So Instagram.com/Obscuracast. You can find us on both of those platforms as far as clips and like little snippets of the show in case you guys are curious. We've had a lot of traffic on it so far, and I think we've had a couple of follows to our Instagram. So if you guys are following the Instagram, make sure you come and follow the Spotify as well as Apple Music. We're on both platforms for that. So if you guys are trying to listen to the podcast, we're on both of those platforms as well as the two platforms I mentioned for social media, which is the Instagram and the X. So, but interesting topic for us tonight, brother. We have something kind of fanatical to talk about, and it's going to be an interesting conversation for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. We have Heaven's Gate to talk about this evening.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Disclaimer, warning.
Yeah, so if anybody's not familiar with Heaven's Gate, it is a cult that ended, unfortunately, in a mass suicide. Suicide's never really anything to toy around with. So I want to make that full disclosure that we might be getting into some of that context and that, sort of verbiage. So if anybody is squeamish, we apologize. But again, this is one of those shows where we want to make sure that, we keep the topics interesting and that kind of thing. So if this is not your bag, completely understand, but we want to give that disclaimer before we start the episodes that we will be talking about suicide and a couple other things that might be a little bit too close to home for some people. So we want to make the disclaimer now. So sort of want to set the scene since that disclaimer is already out there. So March 1997, 39 people willingly ended their lives, believing that a spaceship was hiding behind a comet. And like I said, brief trigger warning, we're going to be talking about suicide and the implications of suicide and what this meant to the whole cult and all of that kind of stuff. So just want to make that apparent. So Dan, as far as the tone of what we're talking about, there's sort of three different avenues that we could go through for this episode as far as the end result. Do you think this was a mass suicide? Do you think it was manipulation? Or do you think it was something more disturbing than that? Where do you sort of sit on those three sort of avenues?
I mean, it kind of checks all the boxes, doesn't it? I mean, you got the first one. Can't argue that. Definitely manipulation, which we'll get into that later. But you had, in order to get people to voluntarily do that, you're convincing them to do that. You're manipulating people. And definitely some more disturbing details. I don't know. I think it's all three. What do you think?
I kind of side with you in the realm of, what they sort of described it as in some of the documentaries and some of the, news pieces that I saw on the cult, as well as we watched the initiation video and a couple other really interesting pieces of information, video wise and audio wise. They described it as 38 murders and one suicide, which I thought was an interesting take.
Yeah.
The reason why I think that's an interesting take is because it kind of checks, like you said, all three boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
8 people gave up their lives for, well, let's say, because there were 2 people involved, right? There was Bonnie Niddles as well as, I'm blanking on the gentleman's name.
Marshall Applewhite. He was him and Bonnie. Do and T.
So I don't know if, because I'm getting ahead of myself, but apparently what they did, how they did the initial mass suicide was in pairs, correct?
Believe so.
I think that's right, but we'll get into that. We might need to fact check that, but I think they did it in pairs. So the question is, who went first? Because obviously you could probably say that Marshall Applewhite was probably I don't want to say the head honcho, but essentially the head of the cult. I would think.
No, he was. There was no everyone thought he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so that's my point is that if you're talking about 38 suicides or 38 murders and one suicide, then that's who I would point the suicide to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I like I said, I sort of sit with you on the 3 check boxes thing, is because it was disturbing that he was able to manipulate 38 people to go down with him based on what we saw, based on the information that we saw as well as listened to. The manipulation aspect is definitely there. You know, you could talk about manipulation in not just this, but religion in general. That's
Hmm.
a different topic. That's a bit of a tangent, but again, there is some form of manipulation in that kind of realm of thinking. And then you also have the mass suicide thing. So if we're talking about mass suicide, you know, these people voluntarily ate, I believe it was applesauce, and blanking on the drug they took, but it was a barbiturate. It was a barbiturate, and it was essentially what it did was is it basically stopped or slowed your breathing to the point where you passed out. That's essentially what it did, from what I remember.
Yeah, so most members took barbiturates. This is off Wikipedia, by the way, everybody. Religious scholar Catherine Wessinger said that the suicides began on March 22nd. Most members took barbiturates and alcohol and then placed bags over their heads.
So
They
essentially
warned,
they had the barbiturate slowing their heart rate, and then they basically asphyxiated themselves.
and the alcohol to probably enhance that as well.
Yeah.
They wore Nike shoes and black uniforms with patches that read Heaven's Gate Away Team. A bag that contained a few dollars and a form of identification was placed beside most bodies. The deaths occurred over 3 days. Applewhite was one of the last 4 to die. 3 assistants helped him commit suicide and killed themselves. An anonymous tip led the San Diego County Sheriff's Department to search the mansion. They found 39 bodies there on March 26th. It was considered the largest group suicide involving U.S. citizens since the 1978 mass suicide of 913 Americans in Jonestown, Goya. Applewhite's body was found seated on the bed of the mansion's master bedroom. Medical examiners determined that his fears of cancer had been unfounded, but that he suffered from coronary arteriosclerosis. So that's fun.
So the court that sounds more like a heart attack like risk.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So I wanted to pose a question to you about this, since we just talked about the implications and the tone of what we're going to be talking about. Why do you think intelligent seemingly normal people believe this or went along with this? What do you think was the what do you think were the contributing factors, and why they went along with what happened?
Well, I think you got to look at why do people join cults? Why do people join anything? Why do you join a bowling league? Socialize. You're looking for something's missing in your life. These people, like Marshall Applewhite, they pry on individuals they might be smart, but they also might be a little weak minded. Like, you can be smart, but you can also be like weak-minded as far as like very easy to manipulate. Watching, like, we'll talk about later, like watching that like part 1 of the initiation video, it's like just look at the guy and how he's talking and like his eyes and everything. It's like, okay, like red flag maybe. I don't know, but there's a lot of people on this planet, and I think just because you're essentially book smart doesn't necessarily mean that you're street smart, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I think it was also charismatic how confident he was about the whole ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence gets you a long way in manipulating people.
Mm-hmm.
If you're confident about something and believe it wholeheartedly and it's true to your core beliefs, we could make the argument that religion in general, not just Christianity or anything else, is manipulative. Like,
You
I
can.
mean, I mean, like I said, I'm agnostic. I think you grew up Catholic. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's differencing of opinion based on religion, based on what we're talking. Like, based on religion, there's different venues you can go down for pretty much anything, how to live your life, who you should look up to as far as a deity and that kind of thing. So it's all subjective, but this seemed more, from what we saw, as well as like the initiation video and all the information we looked up as far as preparing for the episode, seems like this guy sort of had a, let's say, a wild take on things, and was able to, we call these people, like, we call them like normal individuals, but what is normal? That's sort of like the argument you could make there, is that This is probably way before they had, like, these people might have been suffering from depression, they might have been schizophrenic, they might
That's
have been
kinda
all these
what yeah, like,
they might have been all these different things that are contributing factors to why they went along with this so voluntarily, right?
yeah, and what also I think is important too that I didn't mention is you gotta think of the time period. Like, him and Bonnie started this in the '70s.
Right. Good
So I
point.
think, time period, what were crazy times, the '60s and the '70s. You can even throw in the '80s were kinda crazy
I mean, if
as
we're talking
well.
about the '60s, it was like the age of, like, LSD and all that kind of stuff.
Free love and all that stuff,
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about all that kind of stuff, then everybody was it's sort of what we did in the last episode with the Stanford experiment. They were looking for a
Yeah.
new opportunity, they were rebellious, they wanted it
Mhm.
was the whole hippie movement that we spoke about in that episode, but I don't wanna get too far off on that tangent, but at the same time, it makes sense.
But this plays a part in that. Like, that
100%.
time, that hippie area, all that definitely plays a big part in the evolution of him. I know that he was a band director at one point. He
Yeah, he
dealt
was
with
a former
mental health
music
issues.
professor from what I
Yeah,
understand, correct?
yeah, yeah, and, I mean, he was, would you call it eccentric? Like
Eccentric? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would
like,
call it eccentric. That's the
and
nice way of putting it.
I think, a lot of people, if you're in theater and in the arts, you're gonna, the good ones are very eccentric. He was charismatic too.
Yeah, but
Gotta say he's
that feeds into my point of being confident, that's the same
Mhm,
thing, right?
mhm,
But I think what you touched on as far as the time period was interesting because you had the rise of new age movements, you had the whole, like, '70s would have been, like, the disco era, right, into the '60s, into the '70s would be, like, the disco era when everybody was, like you said, free love and doing whatever the hell they wanted to do, and Woodstock happened and all that kinda stuff. All of that was sort of like the free thinking era that we look back to as far as, like, people were just out living their lives and doing whatever the hell they wanted all the time, right?
yeah,
So it was sort of accepted to sort of do something outlandish, I guess, if that sort of makes sense. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I mean,
It wasn't as, like, trigger point as it is now, I feel like, where, like, today, you'd be like people would be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, "This is not like, this is a little weird." Like,
yeah, I
you
mean,
get what I'm saying?
cults were kind of like a bigger thing. Not that there aren't cults now, but like, you also look, okay, Charles Manson cult. Like, you had that, you had the other one, the Jim Jones one. Like, cults were more because again, it was the hippie movement. They all wanted to live together and whatnot, whatever the hell they were doing. Essentially, who doesn't want to go live in a perfect harmony place where there's no, it's just everybody's happy and every food and everything you need is in abundance and you can by him using the UFO Halley's Comet, the Earth as a stepping stone thing was very which we can get into more of that later, but it's like Scientology now. Like,
I agree.
you know,
I agree.
how are they able to do it? And
And
they're
they're
on
still
a
around. It's still very, very viable as far I mean, you have people like Tom Cruise and John Travolta and all sorts of people that have bought into that reality, and like I said, it's all subjective. I'm not saying one's worse than the other. I think the mass suicide thing is crazy. I think that's a
yeah,
little wild.
yeah.
But if you're gonna believe in something, I mean, as long as like I said, this is sort of my out view, and I've said it on multiple episodes, that if you're not hurting anybody, you're not hurting yourself, and you're not a detriment to society, do whatever the fuck you wanna do.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing that's tough with this one is like, you and I have both I've had multiple people. I think you've also had multiple people, not getting too far into it, that have committed suicide. And people either are okay with it or aren't okay with it. Very few people are like in the middle. I don't know
Yeah,
if you really can be in the
it's
middle.
definitely an extreme. You're either very I don't wanna use the
Right.
word stoic, but, like, stoic about it, where you have to sit and think about it, and it's not necessarily an emotional reaction, then you have the other extreme, which would be
Mhm,
myself, where, like, I'm very there like I said, without giving names away, there have been some very prominent people in both of our lives that have
mhm.
gone down that road, and it's not an easy road to walk, especially if you're somebody that was close to them. It's horrible.
Yeah,
It's horrible.
yeah, it is.
It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. That's what I always say about that thing. I
To an
think you should
extent.
I understand that, but, like, there are ways to counteract it. Some people it doesn't work for, I completely get that, completely understand, but there are ways around it if you're able to commit to it and make sure that you can take the help that you need. Some people, it's far
Yeah,
past because they get so down that road that there's no coming back for it. And I understand both sides of it. I completely understand
yeah.
it.
I think some people, like, their health is only gonna get worse, and in that case, it's like, okay, do you really want them to suffer?
Right.
I don't know, and
Yeah.
especially it's where religion comes in. Some people are very spiritual, they believe that your spirit lives on. Certain people aren't afraid to go, they think it's an uplifting thing, which kinda plays into this one where this is a suicide thing where people weren't normally you're not committing suicide in a mansion because you're doing that because 'cause you're not in a good headspace, right? Things aren't going well. This is the opposite. This is people,
100%.
like, excited to do it, so it's different than, like, "I'm depressed, my life sucks, blah, blah,
Right.
blah" thing,
It's
which
the
may or
other
may
it's the other extreme that you're going on to something better, 100%.
yeah, and, that's why it's tough because, again, we don't know. I'm not saying that I condone what they did, but I don't know.
It's tough. It's a hard road to trek for sure. It's a very
Like
touchy subject. Like I said, you and I have both experienced it, so we're talking from experience.
mhm,
It's not something that's easy. It's not something that you should condone. It's not it's I think that it gets to a point for some people where there's no other way out, but me personally, I think you can always get help. If you want the help, you will be able to get the help. But
mhm,
for some people, that's not how they're preconditioned. I completely understand that from a conditioning perspective. It's just the way they grew up. It's
right.
I completely understand. But I think it's also tragic that you get to the point where you're not able to ask for help. I think that's terrible. Because the whole ordeal of that act in general is something nobody should ever have to go through. I realize that's a reality and some people do have to go through that, but I wish it wasn't a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think with
So
this, it's definitely it's different because,
it's a
again, these
100% flip
people
on its
are
head. I completely agree with you with
it's
that. Where like they were manipulated or whatever you want to call it, whatever word you just want to slap on this thing. They were preconditioned and conditioned throughout their time with the cult that this was okay and that it was an honor to do this. Like they were gonna pass on to something better and everything was gonna be gravy.
yeah, they definitely with the religious aspect that they brought into it, definitely manipulated them. I mean, having grown up Irish Catholic and stuff, Jesus died for our sins. He's not gonna commit suicide, like, not tell people I don't know, I just don't see
You don't see the connection.
I don't. And again, I've only briefly skimmed the surface on this thing because it's just it's a lot. It's a lot and the more I think you dig on it, you start thinking like, okay, some of these people like you said probably were in a bad spot and then he was very positive and he was very confident, very uplifting, so probably felt like, "Oh wow, this feels
Well,
really
you
good and
gravitate
amazing."
towards confidence.
He must yeah.
Everybody wants to be the smartest person, most confident person in the room. That's just a fact for some people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, but I think the personal struggles, the mental health, the religious obsession that you talked about with Applewhite, I think that's an interesting take.
Mhm.
And then you also had Nettles, Bonnie Nettles on the other side of things. She was big into theology.
Mhm.
So she was sort of like the religious aspect of his counterpoint as far as the religious obsession. So she sort of backed that up. Does that sort of make sense to you?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But the early teachings of the cult, just to sort of set the tone of what Heaven's Gate was, Earth was a temporary classroom. Basically, they thought of it as a learning experience. They were able to learn what humans were about and how they interact with nature and all that kind of stuff. And it was all a classroom or a test or a um indoctrination of what humans were about so they could understand once they got to that. I think they called it like the next evolutionary level is essentially what they were talking about with the cult. That was what they were ascending to. I don't know how you feel about, but that's sort of like what I got from is that like
Yeah. It goes
they were here to experience human existence. So when they got to where they were supposed to go, when they passed away or whatever, when they ascended, let's say ascended,
mm,
they would understand why that was so much better than their human form. Like it was like that next level mentality where like we got to experience this so we can understand how great the next level is going to be. How do you feel about that?
so here's how I feel about it, and this is what I would compare it to, and you let me know. what you think on this. It seems like they're almost taking like Buddhist monk ideologies
So like
and the
reincarnation, is that what you're
Bible.
sort of getting at?
I wouldn't say reincarnation, no, because their whole thing wasn't to reincarnate and come back to this planet. Theirs was more of a, when you talk about the levels, like when, the Buddhists, they meditate, they'll go years without eating or drinking anything. Like some of them will go their entire life, never say a word, whatever, because they're trying to get to nirvana, right? So there's different levels. So I think they took parts of that, parts of the Bible and Christianity and other stuff. And also, we've talked about on this podcast with the Anunnaki and ancient Sumerian tablets, and as far as like us being our the bodies being vessels for the spirits, and this, Earth is a holding cell for spirits, and then whatever. I think they did a culmination of a bunch of shit so that way they could really mold people into this thing of like a bunch of different shit. So they had an aspect of that they could pull from anything. So if they went, so they were talking to somebody about joining their cult, or if somebody was interested, they could hit every different aspect and really pull them in.
So you essentially think it was well-rounded? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Where they sort of hit every aspect of their life and were able to sort of give an explanation of why their ideal and their, let's call it what it is. It was a cult. Their cult was better than just ordinary life.
Yeah. Yeah, and it blends a little bit of, it blends a little bit of sci-fi and religion.
Yeah, it's kind of
UFOs
like
are,
this. It's kind of like the Star Trek aspect, like
yes,
beaming up and
yes.
like jettisoning your body and all that kind of shit.
Yeah, if you kind of look at Marshall's clothes, he looks very Spockish.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. He's got like
yeah.
the turtleneck on and the
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And everyone, just to let you know, Heaven's Gate website is up and running still. And oh boy, if you haven't checked this puppy out, you have some time where you are bored with your life, check this thing out, because I don't know,
It looks like it might be the most generic website coming from a tech perspective that I've ever seen.
it's generic, but it's so 70s, 80s.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, looks like, you know what it looks like? It looks like a website to an old, like, asteroid video game, like an arcade game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very like new age techie for like the 80s and 90s
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, and to let everybody know, you can still order a hard copy of their book. You might be a little late with Haley's Comet there, but yeah, no, they have their initiation videos. They have all sorts of stuff. You can get transcripts of their meetings on here. Wild. And then they have 17 steps, the behavioral guidelines that Bonnie came up with for her classroom. These were given out in the early days of the classroom. First one, can you follow instructions without adding your own interpretation? Don't ask questions. Just do as we say. That's what that means. Can you deliver instructions as you receive them, or do they change according to your computer? Do you participate in inconsiderate conversation, polluting the ears of others while you and your partner work things out? Are you physically clumsy, breaking things because you handle them too harshly or carelessly? I'd be out.
I'd be
Do
out
you
as wild.
do you
I fumble
halfway?
shit all the time. Shit.
I mean, do you halfway complete a task because of your poor standard of what is thorough? Do you put tasks off and procrastinate? Like, think about how many people reading
If you
this would be
put
like,
tasks off,
oh
if
yeah,
you procrastinate, I'm out.
yeah. Like, are your patterns of cleanliness, sensitivity, gentleness, etc. consistent, or are they good only when spotlighted?
I'm out.
Or,
Cleanliness, I'm definitely out.
Do you use more of something than is adequate? For example, excessively high cooking flame, more toothpaste than necessary. Shit you not.
I'm so
That
out.
is,
I hit
I don't know.
3 out of what? 3 out of 10 or 3 out of 7 or something like that. I'm out.
No, I mean, yeah, like,
I'm so
but
out.
I don't know about you, but when I'm trying to boil water, I put the stove.
Power boil, brother. Are you shitting me? Absolutely
No,
not. I'm not
it's,
waiting around for 30 minutes for my water to boil to make some hard-boiled eggs. You got me all the way fucked up.
dude, we're only at 8, by the way.
Power boil.
We're at
Fuck
we're at
that shit.
fucking number 8. All right. Number 9, do you go from one extreme to another, as far as from overeating to undereating, etc.? Are you sensitive when approaching another individual about something you want to discuss? Do you permit that individual the choice to continue what he is doing, or do you force him to drop it in order to give attention to you? Do you stop and check, or do you assume that what is on your mind is more important than what is on theirs? Know the difference between your relationship with your teachers and your fellow classmates in this regard. Boy, we were just talking about some people that are like that. Crazy. All right. Do you needlessly ask a question when the answer is obvious, or a moment of silent observation would quickly reveal the answer? Are you pushy, aggressive, interfering, or demanding in any way? We're only at number 12, big guy.
These are so generic, it's disgusting.
It's insane. Has
Do you
familiarity
use
caused
more what's necessary? Yeah, I do. Do I get dirty
has
sometimes? Yeah, I do. Like, what?
but you're supposed to read this and be like, yeah,
Well, I'm
yeah, and
good.
then like
I'm
you
straight. I'm good.
but how many people read this and were like, "Oh, you
39.
know what?" They had to have had more than that. Has familiarity caused you to become so relaxed with your partners or others that your actions or words don't hold enough restraint? Yeah, I'm out again. I very rarely bite my tongue. Not gonna lie. Are you gentle, simple, cautious, and thoroughly restrained in your steps and all other physical actions or words? We already covered that question. That's a slightly different worded question, but I would say that's still kind of the same damn question. Okay. Have you outgrown defensiveness and its flip side, martyrdom? Can you understand and review in your mind all the ways in which members of the next level are sensitive? If you can, you have no excuse for not working on improving in these areas at all times. And here's the last one. When your teachers have asked someone to do a task and it relates to you, do you treat that task and its deliverers with as much respect as you would if it came directly from your teachers? That is the 17 steps,
They're very
the
generic,
classroom. Oh, yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think also that's worth noting the belief system, since you're talking about the beliefs and like the core doctrines or like the core steps of the cult. Wanted to make sure that we touched on the fact that we obviously touched on the fact that humans as vehicles for their souls, physical bodies must be discarded. So essentially they thought that like just their bodies were vessels, and once they left their body, they would ascend to where they were going. And then there was also genderless and rejection of sexuality within the cult itself, which I thought was
I'm out.
interesting.
I'm out.
So am I. But the theology thing we were talking about, as far as the advanced beings getting evolution, as well as spaceships as salvation. So they essentially believed, from what we read, right, that there was on the back of Halley's Comet a spaceship that was hiding behind the comet that was going to be their new, let's say, mothership, right?
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting also with the theology of the UFO stuff to also talk about how like the sci-fi blended in with the religion aspect, because like you said, this was all, during the 70s and the 60s when Star Trek and all that kind of stuff was very, very apparent. Star Wars, right? All that kind of stuff was sort of at the forefront of everybody's brain, and then they sort of blended that with the religious aspect of them going on to heaven and all that kind of stuff. So how do you feel about that? Do you think it played a part? Do you think they're in tandem, or do you think one sort of replaces the other, or where do you stand on that argument?
I think they're pretty much in tandem, you know? I mean, they did a good job of blending the religion with the sci-fi thing. I mean, that mothership behind the comet is like their transportation to their salvation to the next level, I guess. Is that like a good way to word that?
Yeah, I would say so.
So here's a quick question, because you had mentioned like their outfits and stuff like that. Was this around like the time of Star Trek? Seriously?
Yeah, I believe so.
So you think like they took some of that?
I would say they probably took I don't want to say like a full blown. Let me see when Star Trek came out. Let me just fact check that right now.
I'm just saying, like, they might have taken some pulp culture, like,
Yeah, I mean,
TV
they might
show
have
or
blended it.
whatever,
They
and
might have blended it. So Star Trek premiered on NBC on September 8th of 1966.
but yeah.
So it was at the height of it was at the height of Star Trek when all of this stuff started.
And I mean,
100%.
that show was huge.
If you weren't a Trekkie, you were Star Wars. You were one of the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, do you think that played like, seriously, do you
100%.
think that
But
played
that's what I'm saying is, how do you do you think I personally think the reason I asked you the question, because I personally think it was 100% manufactured. 100%. It was such a, like, you have to understand that even today, people that like Star Wars and Star Trek like swear by those shows in those
Absolutely.
movies. Like, you're either one side or the other, and there's people that have gotten in like fights over the two. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's people that will stand on that rock and literally die for Star Trek or Star Wars.
Yeah, you could literally say that those two worlds are cults within themselves. They're cultish. They're cultish.
100%.
Yeah.
But I think that's how they sort of like, because the question I asked you sort of was like, did it blend seamlessly with religion? It was such a pivotal thing at that time. One of those two, like, obviously we're talking about Star Trek because that was more of the beaming up than Star Wars was,
Yeah.
obviously was. But it makes sense that they would take something from pop culture, something that people were really into or really understood, and blend that into the cult with religion because religion was already an established medium. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're taking
Yeah.
something from pop culture, essentially blending it and segueing into religion so that people can understand where you're going with it. Because sometimes religion is obscure, right? We don't, like, there's ideas of what is right, wrong, that kind of stuff, moral integrity, and that kind of thing. But there's also multiple religions, right? That say,
Dude, there's religions inside of religions. It's crazy.
but that's
Yeah.
my point, is that there's like our secular portions of religion, even through Christianity, Catholicism, there's subsets of that religion, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have
Yeah.
Protestants, you have Catholics, you have Irish Catholic. You know what I mean? Like, it all sort of like feeds. You can't just be a Catholic. Some people are like, I'm a hardcore Protestant or I'm a hardcore Irish Catholic. Like, there's different sects of religion. So you're not just Catholic, but you're something subdivision of that. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So it can be kind of obscure at times, which ideology you want to follow. But I think this is something where they took something that was pop culture reference that everybody knew about and tied it to a religion to make it more palatable and understandable. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
Good way
that's
to
sort
put
of
it.
my take on it.
Okay.
But I also think it's really cool that or it's really interesting, I should say, the life inside of the cult that they were attributed to every single day of their lives. There were daily routines. There was discipline, like you said, with the 17 rules or the 17 sort of ideas or creeds within the cult that you sort of lived by or were supposed to live by.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could even attribute that to like people that are recovering alcoholics with the 12-step program.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, not that one's right or wrong, but it's sort of the same thing.
They had structure, and I think
Right.
that people that don't have structure in their life are looking for something that's structured and, oh, this is consistent. And if they don't know how to do that, like, that's why they ask those 17 fucking questions or rules or whatever, is because, like, oh, we can help you with this.
Yeah, I agree.
The other big one that like, red flag for anybody out there that's listening to this, financial sacrifices and isolation. They would take these people and they were only allowed to, some cults you're not allowed to go, like, you have to completely cut your whole entire family off, like they can have no contact with you, whatever. Heaven's Gate, I believe, they actually let them go see their family for, like, I think a couple days or a week. Interesting. But, like, people were giving them money and stuff like that. Like, that's usually a good sign of a cult
Yeah, that's agreed.
or religion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Uh, I think the use of the technology stuff was interesting too. Like I said, like you said earlier, they have a website. It's still up and running. It is still active on the internet. That was a way that they could reach more people, not just with their book or with their teachings, but they were able to sort of, use the internet in the way social media has been used to sort of influence people and that kind of thing.
When you gotta think, like, at that time period, internet's, like,
Well, it's
new-ish.
brand new, 100%.
Yeah. Like, they were hip with the times. Also, saw on their website, they had a ton of
So
ads.
just for preference, the internet
Yeah.
officially began on the 1st of January, 1983.
Okay.
So when this happened, it was 97. So we're talking about 14 years of removal.
And then the last update to this site, or the last update on Section 3 was 1988.
So it was 5 years after the internet came online and everything. Interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that played a
Oh,
huge part as well. I think the website design and the early internet use, as well as trying to get, as many people as possible on the bandwagon, so to speak, was very pivotal with this. I don't know how you feel
the
about that.
well, the other big one that I'm seeing now also under Section 5 of their book thing, they put ads in the USA Today, like a lot of them.
Shit. So yeah, not only were they doing paper media, but they were also doing media over the internet. So
Yeah.
but I also wanted to talk to you about the loss of individuality, like you said, with the financial sacrifices and the isolation. This sort of plays into it. They had uniform clothing. They had nicknames, like you said, it was Doe and T were the names of the two people that ran the cult. I think everybody in the cult, all 39 members that ended up taking their lives, were had those monikers. They had new names, so essentially they were given names that weren't their biological names they were given at birth. So that sort of would deter you from like your daily life and that kind of thing. You're sort of a new person, if that makes sense in a weird way. And then you had the castration among male members, which I thought was really fucking weird and interesting.
I'm out.
Nah, I'm out too. We've been
Oh,
down for
if
we've been down for
if
years. I'm not doing that to myself.
if
Absolutely not.
if that isn't if you do everything, okay? You're okay with everything, and you're committing this thing, and then they hand you whatever however they did it, and you're sitting there looking down about to end that relationship,
Do
you
the
might wanna
deed, do the deed as
dude, you might wanna find a book club, you might wanna find, like, a pickleball league, I don't know. This is
yeah, it's wild to think how like 39 people thought this was a good idea. Said, yeah, fucking sign my ass up.
I mean, with how the world is, though, like, it's not it's like it's surprising, but it's not surprising because there's just I don't know. There's just so much stuff that is like yeah, so, anyway
But I think the stuff that we have to talk about too is sort of the not just the life inside the cult, but sort of their final decision and sort of what came down to what they believed and what they thought was going to happen. There was a huge media frenzy around the Hale-Bopp comet, which is the Hale-Bopp comet essentially was the comet that they apparently thought had a spacecraft trailing it or was landed on it or behind it. The escalation of sort of the rhetoric of what sort of pushed everybody over the edge, all 39 members that ended up, taking their lives and everything, that the Earth was corrupted. They were running out of time. I think Marshall Applewhite also said there was like there was a title of one of the videos, or I believe it was the first video we watched about the initiation, that it was the Earth about to be recycled, was how he put it.
yes.
So essentially the Earth was going to go through another iteration where it was going to be destroyed. Because there are theories, and you could probably, I think we've attested this as well, that we're in like the sixth or seventh iteration of Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's sort of the idea they were coming from. I don't know if you want to speak on that because you've talked about that on previous episodes. So I don't know if you want to touch on that and give a little more context to what that means.
Well, I mean, Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, that's one of the things that he said. He was like a remote viewer type person. He has said that there's been other prophets that have said the same thing. That also goes into the ancient Sumerian Anunnaki thing. So, I mean, that's obviously they read it. Him and Bonnie read up on that stuff. Somebody had an acknowledgement of that uh, history. I think it's also important to point out, um, Haley's Comet was 1997. Bonnie passed away in 85. So even after she passed away, I think her passing away made Marshall probably a little bit more senile and crazy. So yeah. But anyway, that comes off the Anunnaki stuff as far as the sixth, seventh generation of human beings. Because you can get into like the Nephilim with the Great Flood that we've talked about before, the giants, and the giants were the fallen angels and used humans for mining gold because the Anunnaki, their home planet, was deteriorating and all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, we've gone down that rabbit hole a couple times. So, yeah.
Then they also had the symbolism stuff where they had what you were talking about with like the doctrine and all that kind of stuff, the daily routines and all of that, uniform clothing. They had all that when they were eventually found by the police department or whoever. I think it was the police department that found them, right? Correct?
Yeah, they got a tip.
It was like one guy and it was like an anonymous tip from somebody, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But essentially they were all wearing the matching outfits. They had Nike Decades on as far as shoes, and then the purple shroud. So each time one of them would take, I believe they said they mixed it with some kind of like applesauce and like washed it down with vodka, I believe is what we saw, right? That's the information that we got. And then obviously the bag went over their head and all that kind of stuff. So each time somebody would do that routine, they would cover them with a purple shroud, and that's sort of how they were found. But there was definitely a ritualistic, if you want to use the word ritualistic sort of fashion to how this was done. It was very it wouldn't say regimented. It was very, there was a lot of like
Steps that was
steps.
thought out.
Everybody was the
Yeah.
same. Everybody died the same. All that kind of
Mhm,
stuff.
mhm.
But like I said, the mass suicide was in 1997. I believe it was the 9th of March, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's when the anniversary is of this whole thing. Let me look that up.
No, it's a 20 it was the 22nd, and then the bodies were discovered on the 20th.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah,
That was close. I was a couple days off.
because it was 4 days, remember? They
That's
began
right.
on the
That's right.
20th.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So obviously, this all took place. So if anybody doesn't know where this took place, it was in Rancho Santa Fe, California. That's essentially where all of this happened. How the deaths occurred, we already sort of went over that. They took sort of like a mixture of a barbiturate and applesauce, ate that, as well as washed it down or drank vodka in order to get it, on the way to their stomach. Like I said, the drug, from what I understand, was essentially a like I said, it was a barbiturate, but it basically slowed their heart rate to the point where they would pass out. Obviously, the asphyxiation and the euphoria coming from the bag, I would assume, probably attributed to that. The discovery of the bodies, like we talked about, I believe it was one person on the scene. He found a couple people, and then they had to get a search warrant, and then they ended up finding all 39 throughout the mansion and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to sort of talk about the public reaction and sort of, we knew a little bit about this, Dano, when we started the episode, but as you sort of dug in more information, were you more shocked? Were you more in disbelief? Where did you sort of stand? Because the reason I asked that is there was a lot of media shock with this. As we saw, there were multiple like media reports about what was going on, what had happened, all of the back story of what had happened and why these people did this and all that kind of stuff. And then the sensationalism from like tabloid journalists and that kind of thing. So when you originally found out about the cult, like, because I've sort of known about Heaven's Gate, I've known about the Jonestown Massacre and all that kind of stuff. I've
Yeah.
known about all that, but I haven't dug into it. So when you started watching the initiation videos, when you started reading the doctrine that we sort of went over with the 17 steps and all that shit, did you sort of reaffirm that belief, or were you more of like uneasy? Where did you sort of stand with that?
I just I just thought it was wild. The more you read, it's like you also like I'm sitting here reading this coming from a, decently thinking, not that I haven't had trauma happen in my life, but like, I don't know. But I'm reading it and it's like how anybody, like you said it earlier, how could anybody be sitting there going, this is a good idea? So it's like, yeah, like shock, I guess, and just kind of like amazed at the stupidity, which really stupidity shouldn't shock me anymore because we see stupidity every day, either on the internet or news or whatever, or in person if you're lucky enough. But it's just kind of like bewilderingly amazing to just read this and watch the videos. I mean, when you watch, like, we watched that one video of the initiation of him talking, and I think you said, like, it looks like he's on meth. Like,
Yeah, it looked
his
like he
eyes
was
are
on.
wide
I wouldn't say
bulging.
necessarily that. I did say that, but he's on something. Like it doesn't look
He's
like he's
like,
of sound mind.
yeah, just it's hard to watch it and think, like, how does anybody think that this is a good idea? So it's kind of where I'm at. Where are you at? Were you shocked or like what was your reaction?
I mean, I understand. Like, I don't want to say I understand. Get the charismaticness and all that kind of stuff can draw people in, but there's a little bit too much to unpack as far as like I don't honestly see, and I'm not a very impressionable person in the first place. I sort of stand on my morals and points of view and don't really shake from that. So the manipulation thing sort of bends me the wrong way, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are susceptible to manipulation. It's just how some people are built. It's how their personalities are. It's how they're built, and that kind of thing. And fortunately, I'm not built that way. Like I said, I like to think that I can't be manipulated. I that's a complete fallacy, but there are certain things that I stand on that I don't really deter from, if that makes more sense. These people were able to be broken down and told what to do under certain circumstances. I get that, but it's not like they were being forced to do it. They you know what I mean? They essentially signed up for this.
Oh, it's kind of like the prison experiment, sure.
Yeah, like I mean, I like if I want to know what I'm getting into, and I wouldn't be blindly doing something like this where like I was told what to do. Like I'm just not. I believe I'm a sovereign individual and I can make my own choices. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's sort of where I stand with it, that I don't really get the notion of being told or manipulated into doing something. Like I sort of reject that part of being a human being. Like I like to think that I have free will and I'm able to do what I want to do. But like I said, it comes back to the sort of tenets that I live by, is that if you're not doing something that's going to detriment yourself, you're not doing something to detriment others, and you're not a detriment to mankind, do whatever the fuck you want to do. I don't care. Where I get into weird space with that kind of stuff is when somebody's pressuring me to believe or think something that I don't want to, or don't genuinely believe, or want to subscribe to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess the question is, did he pressure or did he just very slowly and easily
Well, that's the question, right? We'll never know. That's the kicker, right? Is there stuff that we don't know about the cult itself as far as the manipulation or the tactics they use to pull these people in? I don't know. And that would take,
Yeah, I don't
we'd
know.
have to do a lot more research to figure out if that was the case, whether it was like aggressive manipulation or harmful or violence was used. You don't know, because I haven't done enough research on it, but it'd be an interesting dynamic to figure out if there was some form of, control or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would definitely be interesting.
But the crazy thing about this too is that there's actually surviving members of this cult. I was actually watching, I think 2020 did an episode of
Okay.
surviving, or people that have survived the cult that obviously weren't at the mansion when all this took place, but they were still members of the cult in some form or fashion. And they sort of speak about on the episode about what it was like in real time. If nobody has seen it, I think it's 20, I'm almost positive it's 2020 that did the documentary or like the episode on it. So if you guys haven't checked that
Mhm.
out, just look up Heaven's Gate Cult in 2020. I'm sure it'll pop up, but it was really interesting. Like we said, the
What
Heaven's Gate Cult web, what were you saying? What?
what did they say from what you saw? Like,
They
what did
said
they
it was at
say?
a very turbulent, basically, from what I gathered from it, they said it was a very turbulent time in their lives when a lot of things were unsure and they were looking for acceptance, all that kind of stuff. Because as we talked about the 60s and 70s, when all this sort of took place, that's what everybody was looking for, was the acceptance and the free love and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. Like it was all stuff that people were ascribing to at that point in their lives.
And you got the Cold War going on with Russia and
Right. Mhm. You have all the UFO stuff taking precedent, like you said before. It's all stuff at the forefront of people's brains and all that kind of stuff. It all plays into it. It's not something that just came out of nowhere. This is all stuff that the people ascribe to already, that they use, like we said before, with the Trekkie stuff and the sci-fi segueing into religion. They used a conduit to make religion palatable and understandable. Does that make sense?
yeah,
That's sort
yeah,
of
it
what
makes
I was
sense.
getting at with that whole conversation before.
Gotcha.
Well, like you said, they have their website that's still active. It's still out there. It still has a domain name. It's still there. The influence on pop culture was interesting because, we've seen documentaries, we've seen movies made about these cults, as well as like the Johnstown cult, the Heaven's Gate one. But like it's been sort of spidered, and we've seen like cults of other, like not necessarily cults that have existed, but stuff that's been extrapolated from these cults to make them more interesting. And you sort of get what I'm saying. Like been made off the
Yeah.
premise of these cults,
Yep.
and then how the cult's remembered
Absolutely.
today. It's that's up for speculation. That's up for subjectiveness. That's whatever you want to ascribe to as far as what you feel about it. But I think this was a little nutty.
Could this happen again today?
With as much free thinking as we had back then, and as much, because like I said, I don't think it would be a detriment to say that, or like a slight to say that back in the day when this started, there was a lot of drug use. Not that there isn't drug use in today's day and age, but this was sort of when it was acceptable, if that makes sense. So I don't know if, like I said, I don't know a lot about the people. I haven't done backstories on all the members, but like I said, they had to have been suffering from some kind of mental illness. I would think, to make this plausible. The only other deterrent I could think too would be like they were just looking for acceptance. And then the other thing would be the manipulation. Some people are just sort of preconceived to manipulation, maybe. Those are the three things I can sort of point to. How do you feel?
As far as could this happen again today?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is happening again today. Mental health is at its all-time worst. We know that for sure. It's at all-time level high. Everyone thinks that World War III is going to happen. It's most likely going to be nuclear. There's a lot of uncertainty. You look at everything going on with politics right now, not just here in this country, but all over the place. Shit is crazy. And people are acting on both sides batshit crazy. So yeah, I definitely think that that it probably is happening already. Like I feel like everyone always makes like right now is always like the worst time, and like shit's the world's about to end right now. You and I literally just talked not a few minutes ago about how everyone thought this point from the 60s, 70s, and 80s was going to be the end times. Like it's just a way of life.
Yeah, you get indoctrinated into something like that, whether it's religion or anything else. It becomes a part of you. Like it's sort of, I don't want to say latches onto you, maybe you latch onto it. Maybe that's the differentiator there. But it becomes such a way of life for people that they have no deterrent from that lifestyle. You get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I agree with
Like
that.
life doesn't make sense without that thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's people get crazy with you can get crazy with the conspiracy theory stuff going down those rabbit holes.
100%. And we have.
And we have. Some of them have turned out to be not conspiracies and they're actual facts. I feel like if you're playing conspiracy theory bingo in the last 5 to 6 years,
Card's pretty full at this point.
your card's pretty full and you're starting to realize that your conspiracy theory friends weren't actually conspiracy theorists. They were just spewing out facts. Not batting 100%, but fucking we're passing that.
Yeah. So I think another really cool thing we can talk about too is sort of the psychological and the sociological aspects of why this happened, why they still occur, because let's not mince words, there are still cults that are around today. I mean, a cult is a
Mhm.
very generic term for a group of people that have a shared ideology. I think a cult would be more extremist than anything else. I don't know how you feel about that. That's sort of where I sit with that.
Yeah, I would agree.
There is a group of people that can have a shared ideology and not be extremist about it. The control tactics that they used as far as like the doctrine, everybody, had a sort of set of rules. They had to follow that, you were either kicked out of the cult or whatever. If you weren't following the rules, the group think obviously is a huge contributing factor. Everybody was thinking the same thing. So it reinforced what you thought about the situation or what you doubted about the situation that you were in. As far as the brainwashing or seeking meaning debate, where do you sort of sit on that? Do you think it's a little bit of both? Do you think one side versus the other, where you sort of stand on that debate, whether they were brainwashed or just seeking meaning or something to believe in?
I would say I don't think they all were the same. I think some of them were definitely brainwashed. I think some were seeking something. 100% they were seeking something. Didn't you say that the person in that one of the documentary of one of the old members said like they just wanted to be a part, like they were looking to be a part of something? So yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think it's just one, the majority of it. I think the majority of it probably was persuasion. I would say there were probably some people that wanted to do it, and they probably were the ones that helped persuade the other people to join.
Well, it's like you were saying before that, like, when, according to the report from whoever was at the mansion when they found all the bodies and what have you, that there were 3 people or 4 people that killed Applewhite and then continued to carry the regiment until they were dead. So it's like,
Right.
I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. Like what if those 3 people that had killed him had said, you know what, fuck this, we're not doing this. Everybody else is dead, but we're not going out like this. What deterred them from having that notion? Because
Wow.
the guy that had orchestrated all of this was now gone. He's no more. He's not here anymore. He's gone, right? What's the psychological and the sociological aspect of that from your perspective of why they still carried out the 3 people and eventually took their lives? Like, do you think that was more of a brainwashing, or do you think they were just? I sort of think it is.
I think it is too, but you can also look at it. You can look at it this way: if they didn't kill themselves,
Or
now
I was gonna say,
those
do you
three are.
think it's sort of also like a reinforcement of them, like they're following, like they're like, oh well, he did it, so
I wasn't even going to say that. What I was going to say is, now they're all accomplices in murder.
yeah.
So it also might be like, well, everybody else went through with it thing. I guess we're doing it.
Was my point though, is that like
Yeah,
everybody else had gone down that trail already, and they didn't want to be left out. I guess that makes
could have
sense.
been,
It's
could
just
have
an
been.
interesting debate to have because, like,
Hmm.
you could make it from the religious point of view that they were, it was a religious thing, and they saw or believed that something better was on the other side, or they were just completely and 100% manipulated, and that's how it ended. It's pretty
I mean,
straightforward.
listen, you really want to go, like, I can really play devil's advocate and we can really go down this road. What if they did this and they really did go to some mothership and they're living in harmony.
Yeah.
Do I believe that? Absolutely not. Is it a possibility? Sure.
Yeah. But it's an interesting dynamic. Like, it's just, I would be interested to also hear from you guys what you think. Like, because we've talked, I mean, this is a pretty heavy topic. It goes very psychologically based, very sociological based. It's very dependent on pop culture, it sounds like, very heavy in manipulation and trust and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very, very heavy episode, but it's an interesting episode just from the perspective of you talk about a rabbit hole, you had 30 people, 39 people willing to die for this cause. Like, involuntarily die for this cause. So it's a very, very heavy subject from a psychological and a sociological perspective as far as human beings are concerned and how they can be either, I don't want to say manipulated, but can believe in something so deeply that they're willing to die for it. It's interesting. But I think also like the ethical reflections of this, just where I sort of stand, I think that there was definitely manipulation used. I just think that this is pretty outrageous. The fact that he was able to convince 38 other people based on what we saw in the information, because the information is out there. It's not like it's secretive and we're just speculating.
Right.
The information is out there. The website's out there. There is documented footage of what they were told and how their meetings were and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't ring true to me. I just can't wrap my head around it. It doesn't make sense.
It would be interesting to know if like they were on like a government agency watch list or something. That'd be interesting.
I know you also asked me, so we did an episode about secret societies, right? You're like, I remember listening or during the episode, you asked me, which one would you want to be a fly on the wall? I would want to be a fly on the wall in one of these meetings.
Yeah.
Just to get the idea of like, from what I've read and the research that we did, as well as the videos we saw, there is no shot this is hitting home for me. Absolutely none. It's less than zero. It's in the negatives, brother. There's no way I'm parting ways with the man downstairs. It's just not happening.
I knew that's what you
It's not
Blake was like, maybe there is like a 1% chance, then you get down to castration. It's like, I'm actually out.
Brother, we've been down for years and it ain't happening.
I'm not coming in for free Kool-Aid and pie. Not happening.
Yeah,
I'm not even listening.
We're not doing the punch and pie. Like,
no,
it's a little bit more serious than that apparently, and I ain't down with it. I'm good.
So it's funny you mentioned that this is something you'd want to be a fly on the wall for. Here's the top 5 well-known cults still active today. Aleph, formerly Aum Shinriko in Japan. Remnants of the group that carried out the 1995 Tokyo subway nerve gas attack now operate under the name Aleph with over 1,000 members. We still monitor it due to concerns about recruitment tactics and dangerous ideology. Providence, which is Christian Gospel Mission, it's in South Korea, a Christian new religious movement widely labeled a cult by media and critics as its founder was convicted of rape. The group retains followers and activity in parts of Asia. The Family International, formerly Children of God. I've heard of this one. Founded in the late 1960s, criticized for authoritarian control and documented abuses, especially historically. It continues to exist under an evolving name and structure. Universe People, which is the Kazakh Republic and Slovakia, a UFO-based spiritual group with beliefs about extraterrestrial contact and doomsday themes. Media have described that as a cult. That sounds eerily similar to this, doesn't it?
A little bit.
And then there is the Falun Gong, which is global. It's a spiritual movement originating in China. While many view it as a religious or meditation movement, some critics and governments characterize its global organization and recruitment as cult-like. So, yeah, there's some active ones.
Those are the most active ones, just because it sounded like most of those were
these are global Eastern.
I was gonna say they're more Eastern philosophy, yeah. But as far as the ethical reflections, I know I sort of said my piece on that. Where do you sit with this?
Hey, I'm with you. There's no chance. There's no chance with the castration and that. Nope. I like, why with the sexual stuff. And there's another thing that I had read that one of the I think it was one of the reporters. Yes. Okay. This is again off Wikipedia, guys. While covering the suicide, several media outlets focused on Applewhite's sexuality. The New York Post dubbed him the gay guru. Gay rights activist Troy Perry argued that Applewhite's repression and society's rejection of same-sex relationships ultimately led to his suicide. This idea has failed to gain support among academics. I mean, that time period was difficult if you were gay.
Yeah, that's fair. Does it justify manipulating 38 people? And no, it doesn't.
No, absolutely not. There's no justification for it. No.
Yeah, like it's hard for me to wrap my head around it that if it was manipulation, how you could do that to 38 people. Like you can't be right in the head.
I mean, there's some okay, but here's the other thing too. We can go down this road. Hitler was a great manipulator.
Yeah, it didn't make it right.
No, but he made what, millions?
Yeah, I mean,
he manipulated millions. Like you said, good talker, confidence. That's what you need.
Yeah. And like, it's just, I just don't understand. Like I said, I don't understand the thinking behind it. Like if you watch some of this stuff, like it's not like it's not like we haven't watched the information, watched the initiation video. Like we said, we watched a couple different things on him talking, and I even mentioned to you, it sounds like he's talking in circles. He's saying the same thing 20 times in 20 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you're like, dude, like, how do you not pick up on this? I just don't understand how you just like, this dude's just talking in circles, bro. This makes no sense.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, he
like it's almost like if you watch some of the stuff, it's like almost he's like delirious.
Dude, he literally says he is the reincarnation of Christ and that his father and him were transported into human bodies. By the way, he calls his father Bonnie, who passed on in 85. He's definitely delirious.
It's
insane.
Just wild.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely wild. But I think it's a like, we talk about like the impact of like stuff going on today and all that kind of stuff while we were doing the episode. And I think this kind of stuff, you look back at it and it's like, it was a different time, I guess. Like now we seem so much more like suspicious of things like this. I think like we have social media that's able to sort of like give interesting perspectives. I quote unquote, big air quotes, interesting, because some of the stuff even today is wild. But this sort of was like, once they got into the cult, it was a closed off society. So they didn't really have any access to outside forces or external forces to change their mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's how you manipulate people.
And that's my point, is maybe once they didn't know necessarily what they got into, and then they weren't allowed to leave. Or if they did leave, they were so ingrained in what was going to happen to them if they stayed, that deterred them from getting out in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the manipulation is they were able to be isolated from literally everything but the people that they were around within this group.
Yeah.
It's just kind of wild. It's kind of wild for me to wrap my head around. But if it's, and these aren't people that were like brought up from like children where it's all they knew. This is people that like folded into this thing voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you were a Spartan back in like Greek Spartan times and you were bred as a soldier. That's not how this happened. They weren't indoctrinated in it from the time they were born. These people voluntarily, as adults, most of them. I think the youngest person inside of the cult was 26, I believe is what they said.
Okay.
I think he was 26. He was in his mid-20s for sure. He was a former paratrooper, believe it or not.
What?
Yeah, he was a former paratrooper. He was a kid. He was like 26 years old. I forget his name, but there were like people in their mid-20s. There were people in their 30s, 40s. I think Applewhite was in his like 70s, right? 60s or 70s when this took place.
Yeah, I believe so.
So they had people from all walks of life doing this. And it's just crazy how they all ended on the same idea, because I think you and I can both agree this is ludicrous. It's just kind of wild. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute to me. I just don't understand the allure.
I don't know, man. Neither do I. It's crazy.
And it was just so like I said, you said in the report that he was subsequently the fourth person left when they did everything.
Mhm.
You had 3 people after him do the exact
Mhm.
same thing when they could have turned the other cheek and said, "We're not fucking doing this."
Yeah.
It's just kind of crazy to wrap my head around. So, but it's a very heavy topic. Like I said, we put a disclaimer on the episode for a reason. It's a hard topic to talk about considering what happened to these people and how indoctrinated they were and, that kind of thing. It's just very, very rough to talk about. If you guys were able to stick with us through the episode, we really, truly appreciate it. But again, this was a very heavy one. But it's also an interesting one looking at the sociological, like we talked about before, and the physiological and the psychological aspects of what happened here. Obviously, there are 39 people that thought this was a great idea.
Yeah.
So it begs the question to like, what do you hold dear and sort of what makes sense to you? And this, unfortunately, made sense to a lot of people and cost a lot of people their lives and precious time. And it's a very heavy topic to talk about. So then I'll sort of let you close up with if you have any final thoughts and we'll sort of end from there.
Yeah, I mean that I believe that everyone has this little thing called intuition, and like you kind of gotta, if something feels off and not right, you gotta follow that. And like Blake mentioned earlier, if anybody's, feeling down and feels like they, only have one option is to end their life, please reach out to somebody, like get help, because
I was
life
going to
gets
say
better.
too, what we can do as well is I think this would be really good for the episode. We can also plug it too. There's a suicide hotline that you guys can call if you guys are having
Yeah.
trouble in your daily lives. I'm going to look up the information right now. I'll also put it in the description of the episode itself, but I want to look up the hotline just so you guys have it both in the audio as well as in that description. So let me look this up real quick just so you guys can have the number if you guys do need it. The lifeline, the suicide and crisis lifeline is, let me just get to the website real quick. I want to get the full number for you guys. Give me a second.
I think it was also pretty telling that like they literally started this thing in when was it actually? When was this actually started?
The entire cult?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So all I can find is I'll put the website for you guys as well. It's 988 is the suicide and crisis lifeline. If you guys are having problems mentally, physically, anything like that, where you're thinking of doing something to yourself, whether it is that or harming yourself in any way, please call that, get help, don't do something that you're gonna regret. Like I said, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. This would be your first step. Not plugging, just want to plug it in case you guys do need it. But Dan, what were you saying?
Started in 75. What's
Okay.
crazy is they actually had like 70 followers at one point.
Okay. Got it. But yeah, like I said, very, very heavy episode. Like I said, we'll plug that, that hotline in case you guys need to get help or you're thinking about doing something that is detrimental. But as I said, if you guys, I appreciate you guys listening to the episode. Like I said, very, very heavy episode. Very hard to talk about, but we
Interesting
appreciate
as shit.
it. Very, very interesting episode. It's just a tough talk. It's just a tough talk sometimes with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you guys did enjoy the episode, make sure you subscribe and follow us on Spotify and Apple Music. We're live on both of those platforms for the episodes that you guys are looking for Obscurecast, as well as follow us on X and Instagram. It's just @Obscurecast is the handle for both of those platforms. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Mr. O'Neill, it was a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, same.
We'll
Good.
see you guys in the next episode, guys. Take care.